Okay, we are moving on, and the next type of essay that we're doing, we've done a couple quantitative essays. Now we're going to do the argumentative essay. This is the hardest one. Now we're only going to focus on the first two parts of this. We're not going to do number 3 and number 4, but I did want to give you an overview of what the argumentative essay in AP Government looks like. Now this is a 6-point essay. It is the largest essay. The quantitative essay and the Supreme Court essay are 4 points, and then there's a 3-point essay that we'll do later in the year. But right now we're looking at the argumentative essay. So we're going to be working on the 4 points that are right at the front. So 1 point you get when you get an argument, you're going to have to argue one side of something, obviously, and you get 1 point for a claim or thesis. Basically, that what a claim is or a thesis is just you clearly stating exactly your position, and you just make it very plain and easy. And then secondly, with that claim, you need to preview the points that you're going to make. I'll show you examples of that in a second. The second part of the argumentative essay, that's half of all the points, 3 out of 6 points come from using 2 pieces of relevant evidence that support your claim. And then you have to describe that evidence, obviously, accurately. So you get 2 points if you use relevant evidence from a foundational document. So essentially, they're giving you 1 point for using a foundational document that's relevant, and then a second point for describing it accurately. Then you get 1 point for a second piece of evidence, which could come from a document, or it could come from anything else that we've learned, anything that we've learned, literally. Okay. So that's the 4 points we're going to focus on today. Number 3, you'll in the future we'll work on this. You'll get a point for using reasoning to tie your evidence to your claim. So make sure that after you've talked about your evidence, you then tie it directly back to your argument. And then number 4 is a rebuttal point, and that is where you state what someone else might believe about this topic, the other side, and then you accurately say why it is still wrong. So that's how the argumentative essay works. Now, let's look at an argumentative essay, and then I'll show you what the writing would look like. Okay, so here's an example. Political scientists disagree on whether or not the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness as a means by which to select the president. Develop an argument analyzing whether the Electoral College should be replaced by the national popular vote. So, are you going to choose Electoral College, or are you going to choose national popular vote? Now, skip down because there's a couple things you need to look at. One, it says articulate a defensible claim or thesis that responds to the prompts. That's just telling you write a claim. Okay, and remember, that's just you saying exactly what you're going to argue. And then secondly, you previewing your points. That's what is called establishing a line of reasoning. Number 2, it says support your claim with at least 2 pieces of accurate and relevant information. At least one piece of evidence must come from the list below. Now notice, here are our foundational documents that we've talked about. Brutus 1, the Constitution, Federalist 10. So you've got to be able to know those documents well enough to be able to write about them. And that's why we're going to be practicing them a lot. And then a second piece of evidence can be from a different source on the list or from your own knowledge. I think if you can give it from both 2 sources on the list, that's always best. But it doesn't have to be. It could be something that you could use. So now you have to decide, like, am I going to argue for the Electoral College or for the national popular vote deciding the presidential election? And what you need to do is you need to look at the documents and think, well, how could I argue for or against the Electoral College using at least one of these? And then what would be my second argument? So it's really important to just take a couple minutes and think through what your points are going to be. You don't want to just start writing and then all of a sudden get to your second piece of evidence and realize I don't have a second piece of evidence. You need to think first, and you need to decide which side you're going to go. You're going to argue based on your evidence that you're able to bring forth. So maybe you disagree with the Electoral College and think it's total garbage and it should be gotten rid of. But actually, in terms of arguing one way or the other, it's easier for you to argue for the Electoral College. So that's what you're going to do. So you decide based on what is smart. Okay, let me show you an example of this on this particular topic. Okay, so here's the claim. The Electoral College should not be replaced by a national popular vote. Okay, so that's a clear statement of your position. That's a claim, okay? Because Federalist 10 makes clear that people can't always be trusted. Preview of evidence number 1, see that? And in the Electoral College system, as created in the Constitution, protects small states. I'm previewing my second piece of evidence. So very clearly, you already know that I'm supporting the Electoral College of this claim, and that I'm going to use Federalist 10, and specifically a part of it about the people can't be trusted and are always trusted. And the Electoral College, it protects small states. That's going to be my evidence for supporting the Electoral College. Okay, here's my evidence number one. Here's how I would write. Remember, I previewed it. Now I'm actually going to fill out the argument. In Federalist 10, Madison argues that representatives often make better decisions than the people by, quote, refining and enlarging the people's views. This is something that we've written on your document that you need to be studying. He says the public good is far more often found by decisions of representatives than if the people themselves made the decisions. Like members of Congress, electors are representatives of the people who select the president. They are a protection against the people choosing a dictator or a crazy person. Therefore, electors should be given more trust than a national popular vote of the people. So there. Now, whether or not this is the greatest argument in the world is irrelevant. The question is whether or not I fulfill what AP wants, which is I make a valid argument using a document from our class, and this would work perfectly. And I explain exactly what I'm saying. Notice it takes like 3 or 4 sentences here. It's a little more than like the quantitative essays where you just write a sentence or two and you probably got it licked. All right, so that's evidence number one. Let me show you evidence number two. In the Constitution, the Electoral College divides up the electoral votes based on the state's total number of represented senators. So I'm explaining how the Constitution is relevant here because it's where the Electoral College is created. Okay, let me continue. This favors small states because it makes the most important states the ones that are swing states, states that can vote either way, even if they are small. I should have said either candidate, but yeah, that works. Trump actually just visited a small swing state, Maine. So I'm using something literally recent as a piece of evidence here, which is fine. Maine, even though he hasn't visited California because it is a partisan Democrat state. If we had a national popular vote, Maine would be completely ignored, and only the large states would be given attention from candidates. So my argument is that small states are still relevant here. You're going to see in my opposing argument that that I'll use just the exact opposite argument. So this is you using the Constitution as your second piece, explaining the Electoral College itself, and then saying why it's better. That would get you the points. Okay, let me try the other side. So what would it look like if I argued against the Electoral College? Because I could do either one, and so couldn't you. The Electoral College should be replaced by a national popular vote. There's my clear statement of position. Because Brutus 1 argues in a large republic, the representatives won't know the people, previewing my evidence 1, and the Electoral College system as created in the Constitution hurts large states. So I'm going to argue the exact opposite. And the first one I was saying small states are protected, this is good. Now I'm going to say large states are being hurt. So again, you could argue either way. There's no right or wrong here. There's just you making an argument. That's what matters. Here's my evidence 1. In Brutus 1, the author makes clear that the problem with a large republic is that representatives won't know the people, so they will abuse power. The people have no idea who these electors are. How can we trust them? Therefore, we should trust the people directly to make such a decision on who should be president. So I'm using Brutus's argument to buttress my idea that these electors are just like random people. We don't even know who they are, and they don't know us. We don't know them. So therefore, how can we trust them? Just like Brutus was arguing about a large republic. So that's how you can use Brutus to make your point. Evidence number 2, in the Constitution, the Electoral College divides up electoral votes based on states' total number of representative senators. This favors small states because it makes the most important states the ones that are swing states, states that can vote either way, even if they're small. Notice I literally use the exact same wording from my last argument, but notice here's where I go differently. But this is totally unfair because the needs of large states like California, Texas, or New York, which make up almost a third of the U.S. population, are completely ignored because we already know how they will vote. So that's how you could argue that in the case of the Constitution and the Electoral College is unfair, and therefore a national popular vote would be better because then California, Texas, and New York would make up a huge percentage of the vote nationally. All right, then you're done. That gets you 4 points. Not doing reasoning, not doing rebuttal in this particular argument. We'll work on that at a later date. Okay, let's look at a second one, and this was where you practice. Okay, so I'm going to read this, and then you're going to just try this on your own and try to write an argumentative essay, and then I'm going to show you 2 examples of an entire essay just so you can compare yours to mine. Yours might not be exactly like mine, and that's fine. It still could be correct, but I just want to give you an example. If you have questions and you're like, I'm not sure if mine's good, you can email it to me and ask, and I will give you feedback. But right now, the feedback is going to come from my examples of how I wrote this essay, so that way you can kind of compare and contrast. But if you need further evidence or further feedback, you email it to me and I will do that for you. Okay, so develop an argument analyzing whether in a federal system of government, the best type of grant is either a categorical or block grant. So first off, you have to know what a categorical grant or a block grant are. So that's really critical. And then, so if you don't know that, make sure you study up. And then you're going to articulate a defensible claim. That's going to be one paragraph that establishes a line of reasoning. Remember, a line of reasoning is previewing your two pieces of evidence. That's what line of reasoning means, okay? All right, good. So we got that. Support your claim with at least two pieces of accurate and relevant information. At least one piece of evidence needs to come from the list below. Brutus 1, Articles, Confederation, Federalist 10, 10th Amendment. Okay, so, and then a second piece of evidence must come from a different source on the list or from your own knowledge. Remember, you cannot use the same piece of evidence twice and count that as two pieces of evidence. It has to be separate, different source. So you decide right now what you're going to do. What I would recommend is go ahead and set a clock right now for 20 minutes and go ahead and plan for a few minutes and then start writing. Plan for like 3 or 4 minutes. Think about those documents, what you would write as an argument about whether categorical is better or a block grant. Okay, right now, I want you to pause the screen and then go ahead and start writing your essay on a piece of paper or type it, whatever's good for you. But keep the screen paused. Do not look forward to what I did. If you just go and watch what I did without actually writing yourself, you are not getting practice, you're not learning, and the essay is not going to be good when it's due next week during the test. Okay, good luck. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm assuming that you just unpaused this and you already wrote your essay and you're looking for some feedback. So let me show you what I did. I'm going to have two different essays, one for each argument, one for categorical grant is better, one for block grant is better. See what I did. See if you have anything similar. Okay, so here's the first argument. Categorical grant is better. In our federal system of government, the categorical grant is superior to the block grant. Notice, straight up, simple sentence. Don't beat around the bush. Just say exactly the side that you're on. In Federalist 10, compromises made by representatives best represent the public good. So that's like the argument I'm going to use to help. So I preview it. And the 14th Amendment shows that states don't always make decisions best for all citizens. So I'm going to argue because of that, categorical grant is better. In Federalist 10, Madison argues that people's representatives will refine and enlarge the varied people's views from across the nation. This will lead to the best policy or public good through compromise. If these compromises are made from all across the nation, then this policy should be carried out for all citizens in each state using a categorical grant. Notice I have to define what it is. A categorical grant has very strict guidelines and makes all states carry out the program the same. Since compromise led to the program, it is best for all citizens if it is the same in every state. So now, whether that's true or not, whether you believe that or not, that it doesn't matter. What matters is you're making a logical argument using a document from the class in order to argue this point. That's what matters. Okay, here we go. Second point. The 14th Amendment weakened the powers of the states because after the Civil War, several southern states were violating the rights of newly freed slaves. The federal government passed the 14th Amendment in order to stop the violation of rights for African Americans in some states. This proves that you cannot always trust states to carry out policy equally for all citizens, and the federal government needs to step in and make sure this is done consistently and fairly through the use of categorical grants. So now I'm arguing that the 14th Amendment is proof that you need to have categorical grants because that way it's all consistent and you're not having every state make different decisions because they might not carry it out equally. So now I'm arguing for a categorical grant. So if you had anything similar to that, you probably didn't use the 14th Amendment, but then you probably are going to get the points. And if you have a question, just go ahead and take a picture of your essay, or better yet, if you typed it, just go ahead and copy it and dump it in an email, and I'll give you some feedback before you take the test next week. Okay, now let me argue that the block grant is better. Okay, here we go. Block grant is better. In our federal system of government, the block grant is the best form of fiscal federalism. In Brutus 1, the author argues the federal government is too large to do the public good. Sorry, there should be a 2 in there. And the 10th Amendment makes clear powers not given to the federal government belong to the states. So I'm using Brutus to make the argument, and I'm also going to use the 10th Amendment to make my argument that block grants are better. Brutus makes it clear that the new federal government is so large that all that will happen is arguing. That says arguing, but it's arguing, okay? And the public good will not be accomplished. Therefore, it's much better to leave decisions to states, a small republic, as Bruce puts it, where representatives of the states are more likely to know the people, their interests, and be able to meet their needs. Therefore, block grants are best because it gives states the flexibility to meet the needs of the citizens rather than force a one-size-fits-all policy from the federal government. New York City doesn't have the same needs as rural Montana. block grants allow both places to meet their needs. So very clearly, Brutus, the whole local argument, that's his whole point here. Large government bad, small, close to you, government better, local state government much better. So that's what I argue for using Brutus 1. Okay, the next argument. The 10th Amendment says that any powers not enumerated to the federal government are reserved to the states. Notice, whatever document I'm using, I'm first making the point from it that I want in order to help make the point. However, the federal government manipulates states in areas like education by dangling money in the form of grants. It forces policies like No Child Left Behind on all states. But education is not an enumerated power, it is a reserved power. Therefore, the only thing the federal government should do is give education block grants and allow states the freedom to spend as they wish. I think that's what I said under that little thing. So anyway, the point is here, you use two different documents or two different pieces of evidence in order to help make the argument. Doesn't matter which side you pick. The side you should pick is the side that you think you have the best argument for. That's always the truth. And then you describe the document and you describe why it makes your point. Awesome. I hope that helps. If you have questions, of course, email me your practice question and I will give you some feedback. Thank you guys. Good luck.